Hello, everybody. It's great to be here one more time today. My name is Gary Fowler. I'm the CEO, President, Founder of GSD Get You Done Venture Studios and Family Office. I'm a 17-time serial entrepreneur with several unicorns under the belt. I was on the original management team at Click Software, which was sold to Salesforce for $1.35 billion. Also, Eva.ai, an AI HR tech company I co-founded with Dr. David Yang. We believe at GSD that intellectual capacity is evenly spread around the world, but opportunities are not. Today, I'd like to welcome you to Top Global Startups, GSD Presents, where we're building the future of technologies and shaping our global directions. Today's episode is about the real backbone of the global economy, frontline workers, and how AI can finally work for them, not around them. I'm excited to welcome Ben Rodier, CEO and co-founder of FrontlineIQ. Ben is a seasoned entrepreneur with over 20 years worth of experience building companies at the intersection of sales, commerce, and technology. As a co-founder of Salesfloor, he helped redefine the role of sales associates for some of the world's largest retail brands, turning frontline employees into empowered, data-driven professionals. Today at Frontline IQ, Ben is taking that mission even further, using AI-powered coaching and intelligence to unlock performance, opportunity, and upward mobility for millions of frontline workers worldwide. In this conversation, we'll explore how AI can become a coach, a guide, and a multiplier for the people who keep the global economy running, and what it takes to design technology that respects humanity at scale. So I'd like to introduce my new friend Ben to the show today. Hi, Ben.
Hey, Gary. Great to be here. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Let's start with the big picture. When you say frontline workers are the backbone of the global economy, what does that mean to you, and why is this moment critical?
When I started out in my career after school, I worked in retail, like I'm sure many of us have. And working at retail taught me a lot of what I know today. It was the foundation of work for me. And frontline, specifically frontline sales workers, are probably the largest segment of the population when you look at the workforce, whether you work at a restaurant, a store, a bank, or a car dealership. Folks who serve customers face to face every day not only are a huge part of the working population, but it also represents like a major majority of transactions, consumer transactions and purchases that happen. I think the latest stat that I saw was close to 86 or 84% of transactions are still happening face to face. And so when you think about all of the tools and technology that we've seen come to life, especially in the last few years with AI and how things are accelerating so quickly there, it's almost as if we forgot about that large segment of frontline workers and how their world should be impacted in a positive way by technology and AI. And so what it means to me is looking after folks who have been in large part left behind by the AI revolution. And so that's the wedge, that's the opportunity, that's our why here at Frontline IQ.
Before AI entered the picture, what were the biggest gaps, training, coaching, insight the frontline team struggled with?
So before AI, I would say when you look at frontline workers, especially those that work in commerce-oriented businesses like stores or branches or dealerships, the digital revolution or digital advancement of technology created a pretty big divide between salespeople and how consumers choose to either shop online or in brick and mortar. In our last company, Salesfloor, we created a tool that helped to bridge that gap between selling to a consumer who chooses to blur the line between online and in-store. And so what Salesfloor was able to do is create those digital journeys, whether it be through text, chat, video, or appointments, and help salespeople continue the conversation, whether consumers chose to shop with them physically in front of them or online, which is typically what happens today. You see that mix. So that's really what it looked like before AI.
What lessons from that journey directly shaped the vision for Frontline?
I think when you break it down, whether you're building an omni-channel customer engagement solution like we had at Salesfloor, or you're building an AI sales coach for in-store sales teams like we are at Frontline IQ, I would say the big realization that I learned over a few years was it really comes down to just people. And I know that sounds a bit cliche, but the reality is change management is one of the hardest things to do, especially when you look at big businesses with large operations. And it's really the folks at the center of the operation, which is really your frontline salespeople, who are either going to make or break your business. And so when I came face to face with FrontlineIQ and the product and the opportunity that we are working on, it really struck a chord with me because it's helping people improve their performance at work and help them really achieve their full potential. That, at its core, is the problem that we're solving at FrontlineIQ. It's helping human beings who serve other human beings in sales really achieve their full potential.
And it's not an easy job being on the front line because you got to be on all the time. If you're a sales associate, you can't have a down day. You don't want to have negative feedback given to a manager, that kind of thing. You got to stay up and you got to like what you're doing. So how is FrontlineIQ different from traditional training platforms or performance management tools?
Sure. I'll use the example that you just gave, which is when I'm working in sales and I come into work, if I have an off day, I'm not only going to not be able to sell to my customers or achieve my conversion rates, but the business and the brand that I work for is also going to suffer, and that customers are going to get a bad experience. What we've developed at FrontlineIQ is an AI sales coach that's specifically designed to help the salesperson who is physically on a floor and selling to a customer. So think of sales associates in stores, sales or service representatives in car dealerships, tellers at banks. When you're face-to-face with the customer, sometimes you're on and sometimes you're not. And what AI sales coaching allows us to do is we can start to listen to what's actually going on the floor in a privacy compliant way without identifying customers or anything like that. But what we're able to do is train these models on how these businesses expect salespeople to deliver their customer experience. And with generative AI, we can understand if somebody is having an off day, if they're being a little less friendly than they should be, if they're calling the customer a client instead of a guest. These are all the things that make up what a sales process or a sales playbook is designed to train on. But yet there's no tool out there that actually allows the business to understand whether the sales playbook is being executed on the floor. That's where we come in. We understand voice, conversation, interactions, and data, and we can report back to the salesperson and the management layer as to whether that sales playbook is achieving what it's set out to do.
Many workers fear AI will replace them. How do you flip that narrative and position AI as an enabler instead of a threat?
When we started this company, we actually we tested it in an incubation or a venture studio phase, kind of like what GSD does. And we worked with Ashley Furniture. And one of the senior leaders at Ashley Furniture, the CEO actually said to us, I want you to fix my sales team or find a way to replace them. And that was a very high-level strategic challenge to see if can AI replace a salesperson, or maybe AI can help fix a salesperson. Not to say that they're necessarily broken, but help to improve them. And so when we started to understand the capability of AI, we came face to face with a lot of the challenges that you just said. People didn't want to use it because they were afraid we were basically learning from what they do so that we can replace them. But when we came closer and closer to this problem, we realized that managers, specifically those that manage sales teams, the expectation of what they should be able to do is actually completely unrealistic. If you think about what a sales manager should do, they should be able to analyze data, identify a data-driven opportunity, execute by setting a goal, tracking the goal, and supporting their salesperson the whole way through that process. So what we did was we built an AI agent that can analyze data, listen to interactions, and then help the manager become the best manager that they can be. Hey, Ben, Gary seems to be having a bit of an off day today. Go see what's up. Hey, Ben, Gary seems to be having a lower average sale value for the past 3 days. That trend is quite different than what we're used to. Go check in on Gary. Or maybe Gary's doing so amazing that Gary needs a pat on the back to be told that, he's crushing his performance goals. So FrontlineIQ is in no shape or form a replacement for effective coaching, effective management, or effective selling. It's really about creating the ability for someone to be the best performer that they could be with the best coaching and improvement technology that they can put in their pocket.
You know, right now I have 14 large language models that are a team, and it's like my grandmother with empathy and compassion, and she's listening to your conversation right now, and she's coming back with questions that she's developed. And so she just wrote me and she says, how do you design these AI systems that feel supportive and human rather than surveillant or punitive?
That's a great question, because
You can thank her, by the way. That's Neen. Like I named her after my grandmother. So she's coming in. She's very curious and she loves me. You know what I mean? It's like unconditional love.
with one key difference, right? No judgment whatsoever, because it's an AI agent. It's not actually your grandmother. So I think that's the big opportunity with this technology, is that we can get all of the benefits of trust and authority that we get from people we respect, like your grandmother, but we can get the feedback without any of the judgment or the negative.
When I built the model, I built unconditional love into it. So
Exactly.
I took Skinnerian psychology, operant condition, I tokenized goodness, and I came up with a model that is a Rogerian model on unconditional positive regard. Love, just like your grandmother. You know, grandmother loves you no matter what, but also will guide you and say, listen, you might want to think about this, give you opposite. The same thing with the AI. And by the way, she just came back with some more now that we just said this. She's coming back. She said, she's curious about this. She said, you talk a lot about upward mobility. She says, Ben, how can AI really help frontline workers build careers, not just hit their KPIs?
That's a great question. So if I were to think about how the AI can help advance careers and not just the actual numbers, it's really a question of what comes down to, what does good look like? Any AI model, any language model, it needs goalposts. The numbers for us are the goalposts. But where things get extremely interesting is as we listen to more conversations. And by the way, we don't record and keep these conversations. These conversations are transcribed. We call it obfuscation, which means we don't keep anybody's voice or identity. But what we do is we're able to understand what are the trademarks and markers of conversations and performers that lead to great sales numbers, but also successful careers. And so if you think about somebody who went from sales associate to sales manager to regional manager to VP of sales, all the things that person did through serving customers, coaching their people, and managing their sales team are things that they leave breadcrumbs along the way. It's very hard for us humans to understand all those signals and put them into work. But when you feed an AI model all of that information and you teach it how to step by step set a goal, improve a behavior, see the outcome, set a goal, hit the behavior, see the outcome. And if you repeat it and you create a pattern, it can be taught to others. And that's where the intelligence layer of coaching comes in. Frontline IQ has what we call coaching intelligence for managers and leaders who work at head office. And what we're able to do is create these patterns and show them not only what's working and where the business is moving in the right direction because of the way they're coaching, but we can also do the opposite. We can say, hey, you've been wanting to develop this person and you've been doing it by X, Y, and Z. We have enough data now to show you that it's actually not working. And you need to change the way that you're delivering that training and support. So the intelligence is a new data set that actually didn't exist before, that challenges the status quo of how people are developed, not just from a numbers perspective, but from a career progression standpoint.
You know, when I did Eva, your virtual assistant, and during the pandemic, I had switched it from Findo to Eva, and then I worked on remote workforce management, and I did the same kind of things with ontology, ladder networks, variational autoencoders, all that. Then this was back in 2018, 2019, I switched and I started doing it. And what I found is that not only that, one of the things that happened is that people became happier because we're making more money. People became happier because the relationship, if we saw an indication that a manager that they weren't getting, there's another thing, right, managers or supervisors, that they didn't have a good relationship with him or her. What we did is we understood how we could make that better, what that person needs to be able to realize their full potential. Part of it, you get kind of wrapped into a circle and you can't get out of it. As a worker, people don't really reinforce the goodness in you. We don't reinforce sometimes and give positive reinforcement. It's a lot of negative criticism, but if you can get down through, one of the things that my AI just said, tell Ben is, you make more money, you become happier many times, right? All of a sudden the rewards are there and you see the reward for your improvement.
And we can measure that now by looking at things like voluntary turnover. In frontline sales teams, turnover is a really difficult thing, right? It's constant, and very often it's 30-40% of the workforce is constantly leaving because they're either not performing or they're not happy. Happiness results in a lower turnover rate. We reduced year over year 33% improvement in turnover. It went to from 30 something down into the low 20s. And that was a 33% improvement on voluntary turnover for just one of our earliest customers. So I agree with you 1,000%, Gary. When you're happier, when you're reaching your full potential, when you're challenged, this is where people start to lean into a growth mindset. And, going back to your question about what do you do about people who feel like they're being surveilled or Big Brother is watching, I've started to hear a very different narrative around how to deal with that from large organizations. And that is, if you don't have a growth mindset, maybe this isn't the right place for you to be working, and making room for those that would have that growth mindset and be hungry for this kind of feedback.
So from a leadership perspective, how does empowering frontline teams with intelligence change the culture of the company?
It comes down to how we run our business, right? And very often you see these operating system, entrepreneur operating system type methodologies where everyone knows their numbers. Everyone cannot hide from their numbers because they're responsible for exposing their numbers as you move through a week, a month, a quarter. And it's really it's the same approach. There's nothing novel about what we're surfacing at FrontlineIQ to leadership. We're showing them who's being coached. We're showing them how coaching is impacting the business. And we're also able to quantify now how engaged the field is in their coaching. How many goals does everybody have? How many behaviors are improving those goals? How active were folks in the system in the last 7 days? These allow for leadership to effectively have a constant finger on the pulse of how coaching is driving their business. Whereas in the old way, you had a training team or a field team who would spend most of their week or month on a plane, in a car, going into the field, and they would visit a location, and you'd see the location's numbers go up and then come back down. Now, for the first time ever, that coaching can be omnipresent. It can be constant. And so that consistency is what leadership gets as a benefit from being able to see coaching live right in front of them on a screen.
No, that's fantastic. In fact, I wrote a book a couple of years ago. I just happen to have it. I don't know if you can see it. It's Will Digital Employees, What Impact Digital Employees Will Have in the Workplace. I wrote that 4 years ago or so. And, I was thinking about that then because it's profound. And if you wrap your arms around it, these give you superpowers. What these salespeople need to understand, if you wrap your arms, you're going to have more sales. You're going to do a better job. You're going to be happier because it's like having your grandmother there. You feel warm and fuzzy about it. If you treat it the right way, it makes you feel better. So, looking ahead 3 to 5 years, what do you see? How do you see the role of frontline workers evolving alongside of AI? What's going to happen?
I think that there will be a separation of those that have embraced technology. If you go back 20, 30 years from now, you can separate those that embraced the internet and those that didn't. And I think the upward mobility, not only in people's careers, but in their earnings, will be felt drastically in 5 years from now. Those that are more productive, those that are using that productivity to good use, right? Like using a growth mindset to get better at something so that it delivers an outcome. a lot of this technology and AI is going to help us do this. It helps you and me, write better questions for interviews, write better emails to customers, write more accurate contracts. AI is doing all of that for those of us who are behind the computers. But when you're out there on a floor, responsible for converting a customer, overcoming an obstacle, upselling someone on something because it's a great benefit to them, I think that in 5 years from now, those that are capable of using technology are going to continuously pull ahead of those that maybe say, this isn't for me, or I'm not really into this. I think we're going to see a pretty drastic separation of capability and productivity.
You're continuous sensing like that. I'm going to give you a direct example. This is not my AI. This is me.
Yeah.
So I bought a sports car recently. I happened to be driving down the street. I saw this Porsche red car and new, and I went into the showroom, and they had a really planned approach how to sell me on that car, right? And the upside, the add-ons.
Yeah.
And I didn't want them, and I didn't need an extended warranty on a new car. I didn't need a ceramic package on somebody already had bought it. It had 300 miles on it. They already had it done. What are you going to pay me? I'm going to pay twice for the same thing? What are you talking about? It had tinted windows. And what? You're going to charge me again for the tinted windows that somebody already paid for? It was crazy. But the model didn't work. In fact, it turned from a positive model to a negative one because they didn't sense me. They sensed their only goal was to get more income out of it. And so you're continuously sensing, and everybody's personality is different. There's different ways that people want to be responded to. The ultimate sales assistant will be one that understands that person, right? And to be able to help serve them the best.
Yeah. So I think a human is really, I was at CES recently, and there was a lot of talk about what humanoids are capable of and what they're not. And there was a part of the conversation around how humanoids and robots are still not great at fine motor. Handling a coffee cup with coffee in it and walking across the room, the humanoid still will spill because they don't have the dexterity that we have. I think the same thing is going to be true for at least the next 5 years, maybe even 10 years, when it comes to interpersonal relationship style selling. And that's why when the human being is in a Porsche dealership and sensing Gary, who really doesn't want the ceramic package or the tinted windows, and is starting to get frustrated, it takes a human to be able to react to that in a way that I don't see AI being able to connect with Gary the same way a human would. However, human beings are not always at the top of their game. And with this data and information, we can help coach that human. We can help coach that coach so that even the manager is there to support the improvement that's needed to not only give Gary the Porsche experience that he wanted and maybe wasn't getting, but scale it to the rest of the business, because Porsche knows how it wanted that conversation to go. The problem is Porsche doesn't know, nor like the dealer manager doesn't know either, whether that's actually happening in the room when the interaction is happening. That's where I see the biggest opportunity right now, is this holy grail, this data set of live conversation that no one is able to get their hands on yet.
No, and that's, by the way, it wasn't a Porsche. It was something better than a Porsche.
Good.
But it was a Porsche Guards Red, and I had one in the past, and that's why I wanted to get that color in. But at the same time, and I'll give you that for a direct example, right? I went in the last day of the month, and it was 4:00 in the afternoon. They closed at 6. And that the dealership was actually changing hands, and I didn't know it the following week. So, there's another thing about timing, right?
Yeah.
Think about this, Ben. There's another thing. There's another dimension to this. It's not only for the store, but it's for the person. Imagine having that same AI that I'm using right now, like my grandmother, but it helps you go in there to negotiate better. And maybe it's better if the two AIs start to deal with each other, right? Coming in, seriously, because my AI knows me. I've written hundreds, thousands of articles. I've written thousands of different pieces. It knows me from the inside out. It listens to me all the time. Imagine that if they start to go in and you don't have to go through the drudgery. They start to connect the dots together. What's the best way to deal so that it's a win-win for everybody, right?
Yeah,
Is it?
I think we're still a ways away from that. Agent to agent purchases, AI to AI interactions. I think they will be useful to a degree. I think where we see the most value in that right now is probably more tactical or task-based approaches. I think the first time we're going to see that is things like grocery, or maybe having your oil changed. Some of the really tactical task-based work and purchases, I think might be better served AI to AI, but a high value, high consideration purchase like a vehicle, a house, or furniture where style comes into effect, I have a hard time seeing an agent selling to another agent in the near future. I think humans will still want some heavy hand in how that experience goes down.
So what it's saying right now, she actually came back to some stuff, right?
Yeah.
She said, just tell Ben there's some early examples already emerging. Dynamic pricing, automated bidding, and digital ads.
Yeah.
AI negotiation bots for travel price matching, autonomous supply ordering, and smart warehouses. I didn't know this, Ben. Smart contracts, auto executing deals on decentralized exchanges. These are all stepping stones, Ben. But there's a lot of problem. This is what she says, Ben. It's interesting. The
Okay.
trust verification. How do we ensure the agent behaves as you intended? Standards. Sellers and buyers need to share protocols for agents to speak the same language. Ethics and security. Legal frameworks. And very, very interesting, But it said, yeah, it's interesting. I think you're right on target with this thing, and it's going to change everything.
It really is. I used to be in the media business, before my entrepreneurial career, and the concept of pricing advertising is a really interesting one because it really does fluctuate, right? The same TV spot on Thursday night football, or I should say Sunday night football, is going to be worth a certain amount of money unless two teams are playing, and then all of a sudden, the audience growth factor gets reflected in the pricing. So how do buyers and sellers react to that? I think that's a very mechanical transaction where AI would be extremely helpful, but that's very different than deciding whether Gary or Ben likes this coffee table that's in front of us.
Yeah, well, Gary and Ben, and then it's the right thing, and they can start negotiating on your behalf as long as it's really looking at for your best interest.
Yeah.
It's a lot of the pain. Actually, to be honest with you, wouldn't even have to go in, Ben. It would know in advance what you want to buy and just ship it to your house. To be honest with you, I've seen some of this through my models. Almost 4 years ago, we started building multi-agent large language models, and I've already started to see some of this stuff. It's very, very interesting. So, anyhow, we're coming up to the top of the show, Ben. If you want to stay on for a few minutes afterwards and talk, that would be great.
Yeah, sure.
If you could give one piece of advice to companies adopting AI for frontline teams, what would it be?
I think one piece of advice I would give companies who are testing AI right now is there has to be a framework in place for a company to understand how it wants to leverage technology. It's not just AI. It's just, this isn't new. When you are in a position to try something, you have to set objectives for what you are trying to achieve. And what I've seen in the last few months is AI is all the rage right now. There are things happening just because the word AI is in that company's product positioning. And there's a lot of things are falling flat. I've heard a lot of talk around AI pilots failing because I think that both seller and buyer of this technology are not clear on what they're trying to achieve. I would like to believe we have a very different approach at FrontlineIQ. We've got a very stringent pilot and testing phase for 90 days. And we have very clear objectives of what we're trying to achieve. And those objectives are not grounded in technology or AI. They're grounded in the business's objective of trying to grow profit, increase sales, reduce turnover, very measurable things that are not new. So if I look back at the last 2 years of FrontlineIQ, I would say the one thing that companies should be aware of is that when you're testing AI, you're testing any other project. It needs to have objectives, it needs to have a scope of work, and it needs to have goalposts.
So we're coming up to the top of the show. Closing thoughts, and how do people get a hold of you?
Sure. If they're interested in taking a look at what we're working at FrontlineIQ and our AI sales coach, we've got our website at frontlineiq.ai. And I'd be happy to connect with anybody about this on LinkedIn. You can find me, Ben Rodier, on LinkedIn. And Gary, I really appreciate the time. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Like I said, if you want to stay on for a few minutes after the show, we can talk. And thanks to all of you out there for making it over 1,500 podcasts. I appreciate all of you from all over the world. Today, we're in 73 countries, and appreciate all the comments. Stay happy, stay safe, and stay healthy. I'll be back to you again soon with another exciting edition of GSD Presents Top Global Startups. My name is Gary Fowler, and I'm your host. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Ben.
Thank you.